I believe that most of my mental health struggles can be traced back to trauma, but most of us don't even understand what we mean when we say trauma, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Welcome back. If you're new here, then please make sure you've subscribed. If you want to learn about how to deal with your anxiety, manage your emotions, understand where some of your struggles come from, then you're in the right place. And please make sure you've subscribed and turned on the notifications so you know each and every time that I post a video. So today I'm going to dive a little bit more into trauma. I've been talking more and more about this across my socials because I now say with some confidence that I believe that all my mental health struggles that I've ever struggled with can be traced back to something that happened when I was a child. Some of the things pair up with who I am innately as a person. So my sensitivity, which is something that I've talked about in lots of other videos that you might want to check out when it comes to sensitivity. But that sensitivity and who I am and the way in which I reacted to what happened to me when I was younger and the interactions that I had with the people who I was seeking attachment from, my parents when I was younger, have a lasting effect on me in my life today. And that's what I want to explore. So when I talk about trauma, I have to make it very, very clear that I'm not talking about necessarily about a bad event that's happened to me. Some of us may have experienced traumatic events that caused a trauma inside of us, but that's not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma. Trauma comes from the word meaning wound, and so essentially what we're talking about here is an internal wound. To which degree that may or may not have healed in our life is going to have an impact on how we're still reacting to it as adults. But look, when a wound heals, it scars and it never fully goes back to how it was, right? So we understand that if we have an internal wound, an internal trauma, and that's what it means, then we're talking about something that is changed. It can be repaired, fixed and mended and looked after and managed, but it will always be different to how it was, right? So that's really, really important to firstly understand. And when you do start to understand that, and you start to understand that we're not talking about traumatic events, you start to understand that it becomes very, very difficult in our society to grow up without any wounding, right? Just as it does physically, it would be very, very difficult to reach adulthood without any kind of physical wounding, right? And the same is true internally. It's very difficult to reach adulthood without some kind of wounding, right? Now, we may have all gained different ways of dealing with that wounding, and that's where the important part comes in. Now, to bring it all back to when we're children, I believe children are born with two fundamental needs, and those needs are attachment and understanding of who we are, okay? And when I say an understanding of who we are, an understanding of ourselves, what I'm talking about is understanding what our body and our minds are trying to tell us, okay? So understanding what I need, what I feel, and what my emotions mean. All children, when they're born, understand their basic needs and emotions. Most children do. A baby that's first born always knows what it wants, right? It will cry when it feels it and it will react to get it. And that's where the attachment comes in, right? A baby wouldn't survive in the world without attachment to its parents, right? Or its caregivers, but that attachment is absolutely vital for it to be able to survive, right? And actually, I think that stays with us right through till adulthood. We do need to be a part of something, to be attached to some bigger social circle in order for us to survive, right? I think that's true of everybody, right? To some varying degree. Now, when we're younger, something else that I really believe is that because we're so in touch with ourselves and our feelings and understanding our intuition when we're younger, often, normally always subconsciously, and I'm talking self-reflectively here, I'm talking as a parent myself, we struggle to know that our children are intuitive, and so we try to suppress that in them. Now look, let me give you a very obvious example. If I've had discussions with my wife before in the kitchen, okay, literally not even arguments, not even a heated debate, just a discussion, right, or a disagreement, and our 3-year-old daughter has walked in, she walks in and she goes, no, stop it, because she knows, she can tell, she can sense intuitively in her gut, she can sense the friction, right? Now, if I'm not conscious and mindful, this is what I do. I say, no, there's nothing going on. We're fine. Me and your mum's fine. There's no problem here. And so I teach her not to trust that feeling, right? Okay, so I suppress that intuition in her, right? And as parents, if we're not conscious and mindful, I think we're all doing that to some degree, right? We're suppressing that intuition in our children, and very basically and very simply put, we do that because it means we can't hide, right? So in the example I just gave you, I can't hide the fact. I can't hide and just pretend everything's all right, like I want to do, to gloss over it. And so I'm suppressing that in her. Now, when we understand that all children are like that, we start to understand it doesn't matter what we say, but if we say things to try and cover up the truth, then it's only going to serve to confuse children, because they will pick up on what our parents need. So any kind of stress in the environment, any kind of stress within the family home, if we're not being mindful and open, as honest as we can be about it. So let's take the example of my daughter walking in. Actually, what she really needs me to do is say, yeah, don't worry, me and your mum have had a discussion. We've disagreed about something. That doesn't mean that we've fallen out, but well done for sensing that, because it's very clever that you've come in and been able to sense that, so that I can get her to trust her intuition and trust her feelings, trust her gut instinct, right? That's what she needs. That's what I need to be able to do. When I'm not doing that, I am suppressing that in her, okay? Now, when children sense that, if it's all swept under the carpet, which it often is when we're not being mindful and we're not being conscious of what we're doing, they first learn to bury down and push down their emotions, right? Because they don't trust them, but they will also sense that stress and then start to work out what they need to be, because they need to attach to their parents, right? And if they sense there's some kind of stress between their mum and their dad, then they're going to sense that. And rather than being who they are and who they're supposed to be, they will start to become what they feel they need to be. And in these moments, we start to push our emotions down. We bury who we truly are, and we show up as something that we think we're supposed to be. Then we reach adulthood with a little bit of a difficulty understanding who we are. For a long period of time, we've pushed down and buried our emotions, and we've showed up being who we think we need to be. Now, for me, I had some particularly bad things happen. If you think of the very young child that I was when my mum and dad were fighting and arguing downstairs, and my dad had a problem with alcohol, so there was that stuff going on. I would have been pushed as a child into the fight or flight, right? So I would have been upstairs listening to what was going on, and I would have been in the fight or flight mode. Now the issue is, with the fight or flight mode, it's a good signal. I can't fight because it's my parents that are arguing. I can't flight because my house is the only place I live. So the next thing that I should be able to do is to seek help, right? But I can't seek help because the only two people that can help me at that stage of my life are my mum and dad. So what does my brain do? My brain develops a way to cope with that, okay? So it will shut me off from that. It will learn to suppress it. It will bury it. The idea that somehow I'm not going to be able to attach to the two that are fighting downstairs, I will also flip that in and make it my fault, right? So a way of gaining control, rather than facing what's too difficult and painful to bear as that small child that I was, which is that my parents aren't emotionally available in that space, I will make it about me and say there's something wrong with me, something I need to do and I need to change. Now for me, that meant that I became the class clown. It meant that I became the one that made everybody in the family laugh. I became stupid, and that's the role that I became, and that's the role that I took on, okay? So that does become a part of me, but it's not necessarily who I truly am at my core. And so we grow up feeling lost. I learned not to deal with my emotions. I learned to push them down, okay? I learned that if I want to seek attachment in the stressful environment in which I live in, then there's no space for my emotions, okay? Because I don't want to rock the boat. I have to make sure I can be who I feel like the family system needs me to be. And then I grow up and there's a sense of being lost. I'm wearing masks, right? Masks that have always worked for me in particular environments. But then as I'm older, they make me feel lonely because every attachment I make and bond that I make, I do so in the way that I've always made attachment in my life, which is by being who I think you need to be rather than being who I really am, right? And so I miss out on developing that sense of self, coupled with the idea that I'm burying my emotions too. So when I start suffering with depression at the age of 19, for me, that's simply depressed emotions, okay? That's me having a lifetime of pushing down emotions and burying them. They don't go away, okay? They always go somewhere. And then for me, they came out of me in depressive symptoms, things like addiction, rage, sleeping too much, okay, sometimes not being able to sleep at all, anxiety, okay. All of these things I gained when I was younger, and they're now not serving me any purpose when I'm older. Big issue here is that the knowledge of all this doesn't necessarily change any of it, because my brain has been wired that way. My brain develops at its fastest rate and at the most rate by the time I think it's of around age 9, and our brain develops at a fast rate then because we are born, we do so much of our growing outside. The science behind that is that when the female when we went up onto 2 legs, the female's hips narrowed, and so the brain didn't have space to develop on the inside and still be able to come out, right? So it comes out in the way that it does, and it develops on the outside. Look at most other animals. A horse comes out and can walk very quickly because their brain's developed inside. Ours does a lot of developing outside, and so it does a lot of developing outside based on the environment that it's in. My life today is about trying to override that, understanding that so much of what I do, so much of my coping mechanisms served the purpose when I was younger. And it gives me the opportunity to kind of almost thank them, but then step aside and recognize that I don't need them now. I don't need them as a reaction to the world that I'm facing today, and I start to try and rewire that and gain some more healthy coping mechanisms, or some more fitting coping mechanisms for the environment I live in. That's difficult, and I think for a separate video I'll do some of the techniques that I do on that. But I just wanted to really give a little bit of a deep dive today into what we mean when we say trauma, because so many people I speak to say I didn't experience any trauma when I was younger, and actually nearly all of us experience trauma to some varying degree. We just don't have an understanding of what it means. We get frightened by the word. I hope this has been enjoyable for you today. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to, it's been a long one, it's been a deep dive, then please make sure you've liked the video. Some people to check out where I get a lot of this learnings from. Some of you would have been listening to this and recognizing how deeply I connect with Dr. Gabor and how much of what I say comes from the work that he does. He's got some great books and some great talks on YouTube, which you should definitely check out. And then also, a lot of what I've said today is fed into the work of Bessel van der Kolk, who's got a book called The Body Keeps Score, which again was a game changer for me, so it's really, really worth reading. And in fact, I'll put them down in the comments for you. But like I say, I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe in a future video, next one, or at some point, I'm going to do one with some of the techniques that I do to try and override my coping mechanisms. But I'll be bringing that to you very soon.